Who are some people who need help with making life decisions? Let's find out, starting with number 5, collecting bankruptcies. Obnoxiously named billionaire Bob Bull once claimed to be one of the richest people in the UK until he declared bankruptcy. Bull loved to brag about his wealth. His mansion was worth $1.27 million and featured a bowling alley and a collection of 12 supercars valued at $5 million. He shared the extravagant property with his fiancée, Sarah Nilsson, their 2 dogs, a horse, and a ferret. And since keeping up with a property that large could be a full-time job, he hired a butler who previously worked for the Royal Navy Chief of Staff. But behind the scenes, his life was falling apart. Bull made his fortune when he transformed vacation trailer parks into housing villages, but accumulated massive debt in the process. He had 22 loan agreements for his company, Royale Life, and made personal guarantees to multiple lenders. The company once had a value of almost $4 billion, but when it collapsed, Bull owed $920 million. The amount of debt he had accumulated made his 2016 bankruptcy seem like peanuts, because this guy has been bankrupt more than once. Years before Royale Life went bust, Bull faced bankruptcy as he owed creditors almost $5 million. As a result, he fell into a deep depression and was out of work for months. But he didn't learn his lesson, and was soon reaching out to lenders to help him with his latest venture. So he found a business opportunity in the housing market. He turned trailers used by people on vacation into tiny houses, each with its own driveway, backyard, and shed. The communities he built were for people who wanted to downsize and made Bull very rich. For a while. Then, this guy, Tony Barney, sued Bull for $40 million. It was money that Bull owed Barney's 2 companies, Baslow Parks and Baslow Holding Developments. Barney was one of many lenders to demand repayment from Bull, who hoped to reach an agreement to pay his debts off. Seriously, does this guy sound like some kind of TV billionaire bad guy? Bob Bull? That's a bad guy name if we ever heard one. Number 4, wrongfully seized. Federal agents confiscated $8,500 from aspiring rapper Brian Moore. What's the problem? He was actually in the right. The worst part is he had to pay twice the amount he had confiscated to get his money back. In 2021, Moore was in Atlanta at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport waiting to board his flight to LA. The trip was supposed to help him launch his music career, but it was derailed when 2 women from the DEA approached him while he sat at his gate. The women asked him to follow them, and minutes later, other agents in plain clothes were interrogating him. They asked Moore if he was carrying a bomb or had anything on him that could cause a plane crash. Always things you like to be asked in a private room at an airport. Of course, Moore had no idea what the agents were talking about. Then they wanted to know if he had money or illegal substances on him. So, in the spirit of cooperating, Moore said he had $8,500 in cash, which he obtained legally when he sold his deceased grandfather's car. The money was supposed to help cover the costs of Moore's first music video, but the agents didn't believe his story. At first, Moore denied requests to search his luggage, but it was clear the agents weren't going to relent, so he gave up. The agents seized the entire $8,500 under suspicion Moore had gotten it through illegal substance crimes, then told him to board his flight. The thing was, Moore suspected the people who took his money were pretending to be federal officers to steal from him. They were all in plain clothes, and he never saw an official badge. When Moore got back to Atlanta and contacted the DEA, the department confirmed its agents confiscated the cash using civil asset forfeiture. So apparently, they were real. Under civil asset forfeiture, law enforcement can seize people's property if they suspect it has been involved in a crime. In Moore's case, the agents thought he got the money illegally, thus justifying their actions. Although they accused Moore of criminal activity, the officers never arrested or charged him for anything, which is pretty common in airport seizures by the DEA. Typically, the DEA will seize a person's property and pursue civil forfeiture, which doesn't require criminal charges or a conviction. Additionally, because civil courts oversee forfeiture cases, the property owner doesn't receive the same protections a criminal defendant would have, which seems a bit weird. So Moore wasn't entitled to legal protections like the ability to plead the fifth or to be proclaimed innocent until proven guilty. Moore also had to get his own attorney since the court wouldn't provide him with one. Moore and his legal team spent the next year battling in federal court to prove the money wasn't connected to any crime. Since the government had no evidence of these alleged criminal connections, the court dismissed the case with prejudice, meaning that the case can't be refiled, and the judge ordered that the DEA give Moore his money back. But by that point, Moore had spent $15,200 in legal fees to prove he did nothing wrong. His attorneys requested the government cover those fees, but the court denied the request because of a simple loophole. According to the Civil Asset Forfeiture Reform Act, Moore was not entitled to have his lawyer's fees covered. In layman's terms, the law basically states that if the defendant goes to trial against the government and wins, the government would be liable for reasonable attorney fees. But here's the problem. Technically, Moore and the US government didn't get a trial because the government basically just gave up and said that Moore was right, the money should not have been seized. However, it still took Moore's lawyers hours to prepare for the case before officially going to trial. The government presented no evidence to support its allegations that the money came from a criminal source. They simply just dismissed the case with, quote, prejudice, since the court hadn't ruled on the merits of the case. Unfortunately for Moore, he was put in a no-win situation. This is a clear-cut case where the loophole for not having to cover a defendant's attorney fees by the government if the case is dismissed cut out. Number 3. The expensive pit stop. One Las Vegas tourist lost $90,000 in cash when he was robbed by, let's just call her a new lady friend he had met that day. The victim stopped to spend the night in Las Vegas while he was traveling to Arizona to buy a house. During his stay, he responded to an online ad posted by Talisha Ferguson. He arranged to pick her up and bring her to his hotel room. After bragging about how much cash he had, always a smart thing to do, especially around those with questionable morals, the victim agreed to pay Ferguson $100 for some intimate time together. He told her he had $90,000 in cash, and she asked if she could see it, saying she had never seen that much money in person before. So he grabbed a paper bag full of bills and showed it to her. This guy was a real brain. After the two finished their intimate time together, Ferguson complained she had a sore stomach and went to the bathroom. The victim passed out and woke up hours later. By that time, Ferguson was gone, and when he checked for the brown paper bag, he realized the money was too. So he called 911, and law enforcement discovered surveillance footage of Ferguson rushing out of the man's room. While the victim couldn't pick her out of the lineup, the police identified her facial features with the help of the security camera footage. An undercover officer posed as a potential client and texted Ferguson to ask about her services. They arranged a meeting place, and when she arrived, police arrested her. Although she admitted she was in the man's hotel room that night, she denied stealing his money. And look, no doubt she shouldn't have taken the money and deserves to be punished to the fullest extent of the law. But when you show off that much cash, leave it in unsecured in a paper bag, then pass out asleep and wake up with it gone, really, whose fault is that? Number 2. The hotel heist. Thieves allegedly stole $500,000 worth of stuff out of socialite Libby McGraby's hotel room. McGraby had received a $100 million settlement in her 2020 divorce and spent her post-divorce days jet-setting to luxury resorts and investing in business ventures. McGraby was in Ibiza to shoot a lifestyle segment for RTL, a German television channel. During her time on the Spanish island, she stayed in a 4-bedroom villa at Six Senses Ibiza, which cost a measly $4,600 a night. A drop in the bucket, right? Mugrabi's trip didn't have a smooth start. A few days before the robbery, she reported that her wallet was missing from her room, but mysteriously found it later in the villa. Next, her assistant broke his foot and was given strong medicine that made him too drowsy to work or look after all the high-end stuff she had been buying in Paris. Then days later, everything from her room was gone. The thieves took $500,000 worth of her belongings, including $200,000 of high-end jewelry, designer clothing, and other personal items. Also, they stole 2 prototypes of black diamond trucker hats she had been working on. They even took clothes that were left out to be dry cleaned. Anything that had an expensive name was gone. Mugrabi reported the issue to the front desk, who immediately dismissed her claims, saying that she was mistaken. So she called the police, but they also didn't seem to be on her side. Officers made her hand over her passport and told her the only way she could file a report was if she went with them to the station. We're sure that being in a foreign country and having police demand your passport and to head down to the station would make anyone unsure, so she refused and asked for her passport back. Mughrabi then left the hotel but refused to pay her bill until she got her things back. So the hotel responded by calling the cops. Mughrabi eventually did pay for her stay and headed to the south of France. When she got there, she discovered $140,000 in fraudulent charges on her credit card, which was in her wallet when it went missing. Not everyone believed Mughrabi was telling the full story and wondered why she didn't call the cops immediately when she noticed everything was gone. She said she didn't because she didn't know how to call the cops in Spain, which probably could have been easily solved by a Google search. But she did quickly notify the front desk. What's the lesson here? Yeah, we're not too sure, other than just don't travel with $500,000 worth of stuff. High-end hotels do have security staff on the private grounds and safes in the room, but the liability for the contents of the room is always on the guests themselves. If you're enjoying this video, be sure to stay right here on this video for this lawyer's bad decision to start dating his former client's ex. Number 1. The Model Smuggler. British model Modu Adams tried to smuggle $38,000 of nose beer out of Peru. Adams had filled his social media with snaps of his glamorous, jet-setting lifestyle. He went by the moniker of Boy Who Lives and flaunted the luxurious world he lived in. That is, until his trip to Peru. He documented everything about the trip, from wandering the streets of Cusco to exploring Machu Picchu. His 11,200 Instagram followers shared their love in the comment section, telling him he was living the dream. However, his trip to Cusco wasn't as much of a dream as it looked. Lima, Peru's capital city, is a common place for mules to pick up lots of nose beer, which was probably the reason he was there. And Adams went to Peru twice in 11 days. So either he really liked the place or something was up. Security camera footage showed Adams carrying a suitcase into his fancy hotel room in Lima. The plan was for him to transport the illegal goods back to London, but he never got on the plane. Adams had checked in for his flight at Jorge Chávez International Airport in Lima, where 2 officers took him into custody. One of the officers sliced through the false bottom of Adams' suitcase and discovered the illegal cargo. The model did his best to look shocked as the officer held it up for everyone to see. Then, the officers body searched Adams to see if he had anything else on him. Adams admitted to his bad decision in court and received a 6-year and 8-month prison sentence in South American jail. It's not uncommon for Peruvian authorities to catch people attempting to sneak these substances out of the country. Mules can make up to $7,600 for bringing illegal goods back to the UK. Not that we're recruiting. What are some of the stupidest scams that people do? Let's get right into it and start with number 5, playing with fire. Adam McGill stands accused of ripping off taxpayers and laundering cash through an illegal scheme. However, further investigations have revealed that McGill didn't just rip off taxpayers, he also found a way to father a child with the ex-fiancée of a former client. And that former client happens to be behind bars awaiting trial for charges of trafficking and possession. There aren't many more complicated situations than the one Adam McGill has found himself in, but we'll try our best to explain everything clearly. The first thing you should know is that McGill has been charged as part of a 6-man crew following an 18-month Crime and Corruption Commission investigation into the dealings of a Brisbane law firm. The investigations revealed that McGill and his crew were responsible for aggravated fraud, fraudulent falsification of records, and aggravated money laundering. The investigations also revealed that McGill and his crew defrauded taxpayer-funded legal aid service of about $340,000 and then failed to deposit more than $700,000 into a separate trust account. And here's where the story gets dicey. A while back, McGill had an interesting client named Ivan Tesic. If there ever was a criminal name, it's Ivan Tesic. Tesic was held on trafficking charges and was the fiancée of Natalie Lucas, a South African model. McGill took a liking to Lucas, and they started dating while Ivan Tesic was already in custody. So it happened that McGill started dating the fiancée of his client shortly after the client went to prison. It sounds just as bad as it looks. But it gets even worse. Miss Lucas didn't just start dating McGill, she also moved in with him and lived with him for 2 years. But their fairy tale love didn't last forever. After Lucas decided that she was leaving McGill, she discovered that she was pregnant by him. She weighed the pros and cons and decided that she would have the baby despite leaving McGill. But what about when Ivan gets out of jail? Lucas's decision means that whenever Ivan Tessic gets out of jail, he'll be meeting an ex-fiancée that has a baby by his former lawyer. And to make things even better, McGill did all of this while he was separated from his wife. The married couple are now back together, though. It doesn't seem like McGill has a huge issue with this potential turn of events. McGill says that he hasn't spoken to Tessic since the time he represented Tessic. He also says he doesn't think the communication breakdown between both men is due to him dating his client's fiancée. We've seen this movie before, Adam. There's definitely going to be some kind of breakdown. Natalie Lucas, on the other hand, has another story to tell. She says that Tessic threatened McGill when she broke up with him just before he was remanded in jail. This means that Ivan Tessic may still have bad blood for McGill. Thankfully, Tessic remains in prison, lifting weights and being scary. Unfortunately for McGill, he may not remain in prison forever. Currently, Ivan Tessic is charged with illegal trafficking and possession crimes. If he's found guilty, he might spend long years in prison, but he might also get out of jail early. And if he does, who knows the sort of things that may be on his mind. It's probably not a fun movie night with his former attorney. Number 4. Sign your name on the scam. Catherine Paprocka, a former school administrator in Pennsylvania, embezzled about $600,000 from the school she worked at. Ms. Paprocka used the money from the theft to rent properties, go on family vacations, and even pay for in vitro fertilization medical treatments. Paprocka carried out her scheme by taking out loans and electronically signing them, falsely representing herself. The school carried out an audit of its account and found that Paprocka had illegally transferred money from school accounts to a crowdfunding platform and 3 other small business lenders. Paprocka's name was signed on every loan, where she was listed as the executive director and owner of the school, despite the fact that the school is a non-profit and doesn't actually have any ownership. Investigators also discovered that Paprocka had paid over $60,000 into her credit card. When she accounted for those expenses to the school, she misrepresented the figures and argued that she only took $12,000. But that wasn't all she did. Further investigation into her scam led to the discovery that she'd stolen several identities of senior figures at the school and forged multiple signatures to complete her theft. With the amount of money she was embezzling and spending, it was only a matter of time before she was caught. Paprocka has now been charged with multiple felonies, including, but not limited to, forgery, theft by deception, and deceptive or fraudulent business practices. Her bail was set at $99,000, and she's since been released from jail. However, Paprocka had to surrender her passport and was forbidden from leaving the state. Number 3. COVID cars. A California man named Mustafa Kadiri used payment protection relief funds released as part of COVID-19 funds to purchase luxury cars and lead a lavish lifestyle. In total, Kadiri got about $5 million in these payment protection funds, and he splurged over half of it on luxury cars and personal expenses. These payments were usually released to business owners who wanted to continue paying employees in spite of COVID, and Kadiri took advantage of them. He submitted paperwork proving that he owned 4 businesses in Newport Beach, California. However, there was one tiny snag. None of those businesses were operational, and all of them had gone defunct a while ago. But Kadiri's papers looked legit, and he got funds totaling about $5 million. Our accomplished businessman wasted absolutely no time spending the money he got from his fraudulent windfall. Kadiri had a taste for exotic cars, so he decided to purchase 3: a Lamborghini, a Ferrari, and a Bentley. He also went on vacations with the money for good measure. What's the point of being a big giant fraudster if you can't go on vacations and eat fancy dinners like all the other cooler fraudsters do? Kadiri was eventually caught by the police. Guess you really cannot buy 3 luxury vehicles on a government loan without attracting some sort of attention. Right now, the businessman has been sentenced to 4.5 years in jail. He was also ordered to pay about $2.8 million in restitution and a $20,000 fine. And remember, Mustafa, when you're taking out a loan, you're generally expected to pay the thing back. Well, at the time he was supposed to. Number 2. Single but married. Andrea Lawner defrauded the government of over £70,000 over 5 years, and her scam wasn't even complex. It was merely a single, very beneficial lie that sustained Andrea for 5 years and earned her thousands of pounds. Andrea Lawner registered with social services as a single mother of 2 kids, and she got benefits based on that fact. These benefits include extra working tax credit, income support, and housing allowance. However, Andrea Lawner suffered from the same ailment that many scammers suffer from. She just couldn't keep herself from ratting herself out. But Andrea didn't go and get a new shiny sports car like you'd find on the first page of a scammer's playbook. Instead, she did the next worst thing. She started posting pictures of her kissing her husband on Facebook. Under normal circumstances, this would be irrelevant, but this wasn't normal circumstances and is very relevant because Andrea told the social services that she did not have a husband, but she was posting him on Facebook. Investigators soon found her Facebook account and realized that the single mother of 2 wasn't really a single mother and had taken the government for a ride. The police went to work and seized documents that proved that Andrea had been living her best life with husband while collecting benefits acquired on the presumption that she lived alone. Lawner was arrested for her crimes and was made to face multiple charges of benefit fraud. Andrea Lawner had no choice but to plead guilty and wait for the court to pass its judgment. Luckily for her, the judge decided to be lenient. The judge argued that if Andrea were to be sent to prison, there would be no one to take care of her children. Andrea's last kid is disabled, and the judge considered the welfare of the child seriously as well. Apparently, the husband she's been living with is wholly incapable of taking care of their child. In the end, the judge sentenced her to a 12-month prison sentence, which would be suspended for 24 months. The court also ordered that she undertake 120 hours of unpaid work and pay £220 in costs and victim surcharge. Number 1. The Bentley. Daniela Rendon, a glamorous real estate broker, has now been accused of using COVID-19 relief funds to purchase a Bentley. The Rendon case is similar to pretty much every other case in that scammers seem to love using stolen funds to purchase luxury cars. Rendon's fraud wasn't all that complicated. She simply fabricated tax documents that falsified her company's revenue, payroll, and the number of employees she had. Once she got the fake documents ready, she submitted them to approved lenders in New Jersey and Idaho and let roughly $400,000 worth of sweet relief funds start rolling in. Miss Rendon isn't a clueless scammer either, so she knew that she couldn't just withdraw the money from her bank account and start spending it. If she did that, the police would easily trace it and find out that she was running a scam. So she did the smart thing. She got in contact with a payroll processor in New Jersey and started issuing payroll checks to herself, family members, and friends. This meant that even if the police took a cursory interest in her case, they would simply find out that she's been paying employees from the relief funds. It was a great plan, but there was one tiny slip-up. Good old Miss Rendon couldn't simply just keep her money to herself. She felt the need to treat herself, and that's what she did. She got herself a beautiful Bentley Bentayga, rented a posh Biscayne Bay apartment, and paid for some cosmetic work. She also used a part of the money to repair a damaged designer shoe she owned. Rendon couldn't keep her shiny toys to herself forever, and the authorities finally figured out what she was doing. She was soon arrested by the police and was promptly charged with 7 counts of wire fraud, 2 counts of money laundering, and 1 count of aggravated identity theft. If convicted, Miss Rendon could treat herself up to 20 years in prison. Click to watch one of these next videos. Let us know in the comments section what you'd rather have: an inheritance of $100 million or the ability to make $1 billion on your own.